Okay, good evening, everybody. I have three very interesting pieces on Parshat Tavo and also one piece on Rosh Hashanah. And some of this we have done in the past from a different perspective, but I'm going to actually not really repeat them, but I'm going to do them. And some of it might sound familiar to you, but it's worth going over again. Okay, let's start with number one. This is an idea from Rav Soloveitchik. It's actually in Rabbi Schechter's Sefer, Nefesh Harav, which where he brings pieces from his Rebbe, Rav Soloveitchik, and it relates. In Parshas Tavo, we have a covenantal relationship with Bnei Israel. There's actually two covenants that are made, two britot, two brisin that are made between the Ribbono Shel Olam and Klal Yisrael, one at Har Sinai, and the other now in Arvot Moav. The two parts of this bris are number one at Har Evel and Har Grizim, when the tribes were divided on each, 6 on one and 6 on the other, and the brachas and the klalas were given, and the bris continued as part of the TORAH. The actual curses, the anti-brachas in this week's parsha, are part of the bris. Okay, so Rabbi Soloveitchik is going to talk about the utility of two brisin. Why do we have two covenantal relationships? So, Elul divrei habris, as we said in our pasuk. In our pasuk, this is actually Chof Chet Samech Tet. At the end, Elul divrei habrit. These are the words of the brit. Asher tziva Hashem et Moshe, that God commanded Moshe lichrot im bnei Israel be'eretz Moav, to have a covenant in Eretz Moav. Milvad, aside from habrit asher korat itam b'chorev, aside from the bris that HaKadosh Baruch Hu made with us at Chorev, at Har Sinai, Kilomar, in other words, the beis pamim mofia tochacha, 2 times in the Torah we have the tochacha, the anti-brachas, the terrible anti-brachas that happen to us if we don't keep the Torah, right? The brachas and the klal, the chumash. Bepam Rishona, the first time in Parshat Bechukotai, you have the Torah and Bechukotai. V'hashniya beParshat Tavo, and the second one is in Parshas Tavo. V'shama besof hatochacha shebeParshas Bechukosai katuv, the first bris, in the first place where the klalas were given, the brachas and the klalas. Eila hachukim b'mishpatim, these are the laws and legislations, v'torot, and the Torahs asher natan Hashem beino uvein bnei Yisrael b'Har Sinai b'yad Moshe, which he gave on Mount Sinai through Moshe. Kilomar, in other words, shenusach zeh nemar b'shat kritat habrit shebahar Sinai. So the first bris was at Har Sinai when the Torah was given. Kilomar, that's it. V'nusach hamofia b'Parshat Tavo, and the language that's used in our parsha, nemar b'shat kritat habrit be'arvat Moav. This was said, the statement that he's giving us a bris was said concerning this bris in Moab. Now, why? Why 2 brisin? What's the distinction between bris 1 and bris 2? So he's going to point out 2 dramatic differences between the brisin, and he's going to explain our second bris, the one that we're dealing with in our parsha. V'taim de milsa, the reason shahut tzarchu lebrit shniya, why was the necessity for a second covenant with Am Yisrael? Muzbar etev lahalan beParshas Nitzavim. It says in Parshas Nitzavim, this is in Chof Chet, le'avrecha bebrit Hashem Elokecha, I'm going to give you the bris of Hashem, v'lo yitchem levadchem anochi koreit habrit. I'm not just giving this to you, Hazot, ki et asher yeshnu po imanu omer hayom lifnei Hashem Elokeinu ve'et asher einenu po imanu hayom. This bris is not just for those who are standing here with me right now, but they're for dorei dorot, for every generation of Klal Yisrael, for time immemorial. V'hevi Shama Rashi, and Rashi says there in his Pirush on the Torah, he brings a Gemara, Shazot Habrit Hashniya, this second covenant, he mechayevet ledorot habayim. This obligates future generations like us in this covenant, whereas the first bris was only given at Har Sinai for the people at Har Sinai, as he's going to explain. The bris shebesinai rak chayevet liyotze Mitzrayim bilvad. This was only for those Jews who left Egypt. V'hainu, in other words, rak lo tam b'nei adam shehishtatfu bo. Only the people who actually participated in that moment of giving the brit. V'ota brit rak nasta im hayechidim. This bris was only given to individuals. Shahayu nochach b'shat ma'isa, who were there at Har Sinai. Mashen kein, but not this brit, habrit hashniya, the second covenant in our parsha, shenichrasa b'sof 40 shana, which is 40 years after the receiving of the Torah at Har Sinai. La'achar shekfar mesu kol yotzei Mitzrayim, and all of these yechidim, all of these individuals who received the first bris no longer were alive. Bris zu nichrata im bnei Yisrael b'tor am. This bris is given to us as a people, am. Kimo shekatav shama behemshech, in the parsha, right? In the tzavim leman hakim otcha hayom lo la'am. I make you into an am, a people. Now, what's am? What's the origin of the word am in Lashon Kodesh? Kimo shekatav shama behemshech, a parsha leman hakim otcha hayom la'am. The Lashon am bo miloshen im. Right? What's the Lashon im? The word im? Im means with, together. That's the word in Hebrew, in Lashon Kodesh. Im means with. Ani holech imcha. I will go with you. So im, the am, is the unification of the Jewish people. That's where the word am comes from. Am Yisrael. Sheyesh kesher v'tziruf, because there is a connectedness and a connection between ben kol hayechidim, between every individual, lehavot chativa achat v'chida achat, to become one unit of Am Yisrael, Im Yisrael. He points in something, he makes a parenthetical comment, umedina echad. Let's say, for example, in the world of nations, if one nation, she'oseh haskeim im medina acheret, makes a deal with another nation, ota chativa mechayev af avur hadorot habayim. It also obligates future generations to keep that covenantal relationship. Ki kulam hashuvim kehemshech me'ota hamedina, because they're all considered an extension of that country, that nation, right? Va'asher al kain brit habeit, the second covenant, shebarvot Moav, chayava af hadorot habayim acharka. It was also for the future generations that came in Klal Yisrael, Am Yisrael. Ki af heim mehavim chelek me'oto ha'am. They're part of the Am, even if they're not even alive yet. They're part of the Am shenichnas kul brit, that all came into the covenant. That's the word Am from the word Im. The second brit includes all generations of Klal Yisrael. The first brit, only the Yechidim who died after Har Sinai, this 40 years, but that was their brit. Now, what's another distinction of this covenant that we have in our parsha? Umihai taima yesh od hevdel ben habrit harishona shebesinai lebrein habrit hashniya. So therefore, because of that this bris is for everybody, all of Klal Yisrael, there's another dramatic distinction between the bris of Har Sinai and the bris that is given now in our parsha. Havia otav hedin shel arvut. In this bris is the din of arvut, which did not exist in the previous bris. What's arvut? Kol Yisrael arevim zeh bazeh. That every Jew is arev, is responsible for every other Jew. This did not exist in the previous brit at Har Sinai. This was an addendum to the bris given now, because of the bris is for the Am, for all of us. Hanilmad mi'apasuk ha'achron, the last pasuk here in our in Chavtet Chavches, the pasuk says, "Hanistarot laHashem Elokeinu." The hidden things are to Hashem. Hanigolot lanu ulefanenu. That which is revealed is for us and our children afterwards. La'asot. We have to do it. We have to do this arvut, this interaction, active responsibility. In other words, he says, "Dahainu Razal." Razal understood the lashon lasot, to do, mashma miloshin isui, kfiyah. We are forced to do. We are obligated to do it. Arvut is a responsibility built into the second covenant that Kol Yisrael Arevim Zevez has built into this covenant, right? Time of the Yotze Motzi. Now he says, how does Arvut work, right? So the idea of Yotze Motzi, that in other words, let's say, I've given this example many times. People sit together at Kiddush Friday night. There's a mitzvah to be Mekadesh Shabbat, to sanctify Shabbat. One person makes the Kiddush on behalf of everyone else, right? And everyone else is Yotze, because the person making the Kiddush is obligated himself. So that's the rule. That's the rule that he says here. He says, time of the Motzi, what does it say? Again, I lifted the line. Asher inyan me'od vanenu havinu razal deloshen lasa mashma loshen va'asher inyan ze me'od nogei lanu ladina. This is something that's very obviously part of our life. Shari Rashi, Pirush Rashi explains in the Gemara, the time of the Yotze Motzi, the reason why someone who let's say someone has already fulfilled the mitzvah, can he still fulfill the mitzvah for me? Let's say you come late to Kiddush, right? And someone already made Kiddush. He fulfilled the mitzvah of Kiddush, right? Can he make the Kiddush again? Yes, that's called Yotze Motzi. Even if he himself is Yotze, he's fulfilled the mitzvah, he can make the Kiddush again for another person. Why? Mipnei shekol Yisrael arevim zeh lezeh. So what does that mean? This is a powerful statement. Leficha chashiv zeh shekfar yatsa ki'ilu adayin b'chuyab badavar. In other words, Kol Yisrael Arevim Zeh, every Jew is responsible to the other, means that even if someone made Kiddush already for himself, he's fulfilled mitzvah. But if there's another Jew in the world who did not perform that mitzvah, and I can do that mitzvah on his behalf, then I have not really completely fulfilled my mitzvah. My mitzvah is only fulfilled by helping that other Jew who has not done the mitzvah do the mitzvah. Powerful statement. That's arvu. He's still obligated. The imlokain, if that wasn't the case, we would say, someone who fulfilled the mitzvah, he can't make the kiddush for everybody else, right? But that's not true. Because normally misha eino mechuyev b'davar eino motzi et harabim yidei chovatam. Generally speaking, if someone is not obligated, let's say a katan, someone under bar mitzvah, he can't lane in shul for us because he is not obligated to do the mitzvot yet, right? Misha eino yotze, eino motzi. Someone who's not obligated cannot do the mitzvah for somebody else. So for all other mitzvahs in the Torah, that's the way it goes. But with regards to arvut, even if someone has fulfilled the mitzvah, so he's not obligated in the mitzvah himself. But if there's someone who didn't do the mitzvah, he's obligated to do it. This is the exception that proves the rule. V'din zeh hamechudash shel arvut. This is a nuance of this concept of arvut. Lo hitchil ad she'avru Yisrael et hayarden. This only began when Klal Yisrael crossed over the Jordan River. Kilomar v'kiblu aleim brachot v'klalot dehar grizim v'haravel. In our parsha, we received the blessings and the curses at Mount Avel and Mount Grizim. That's part of the bris. Shezeh hayah gemar shel habrit hashniya shenichrata ba'arvut mov. This is the conclusion of the brit, the second brit, right? HaKadosh Baruch Hu ratza she'af habrit hazot hashniya ne'erach tachat chesuto shel Moshe Rabbeinu. In other words, Moshe was no longer alive. It was done in Eretz Yisrael by Yoshua. But HaKadosh Baruch Hu wanted Moshe to be involved in both brisin, in the bris at Har Sinai and in this bris, right? So, because he wanted it to be under Moshe Rabbeinu, Adon HaNeviim, the master of all prophets. Achein, therefore, Me'idachis, on the other side of the coin, Mitzaref L'Klal Yisrael Hu Hayutom Be'eretz Yisrael. Since they became Jews when they came into Eretz Yisrael, right? Just skip over the parentheses, the Sefer HaMitzvah, the sources, V'hayot, Shazod HaBrit, Hashniya Hare Nasit Im Ha'am, Torat Ummah, since this bris is now being done with the people, as an am, right? And also Ummah, another word for nation, Ummah with an aleph. And aleph mem also means im, with, right? So, velo b'torat yechidim, not as individuals. So therefore, it had to be extended and stalled until we got into Eretz Yisrael. But Moshe Rabbeinu was not allowed to go into Eretz Yisrael. How could he do it? It should be established by Moshe Rabbeinu. But the bris was established after Bnei Yisrael came into Eretz Yisrael, when the real im, aleph mem, and the im, ayin mem, took place. He was commanded to begin the brit. V'talmido Yoshua Yigmor, and his student Yoshua completed it. Ba'aretz ubrachot v'klalot shel har grizim v'hareval lo shimshu kabrit bifnei atzma. They were not a separate brit. Ela hemshech b'gemar habrit shehitchilu ba'arvat Moav. It's a continuation, an extension of the bris that Moshe gave us in Arvos Moav. Okay, that's the distinction between the two brisin, and dramatically, principally, is the concept, this great concept of Arvot. Kol Yisrael Arevim Zeh B'Zeh was not part of the first brit, it's part of the second brit. Okay, the second piece is from Sefer Dorosh Mordechai, and this is one of the great Magidim of Yerushalayim in the 20th century, and he says like this. He quotes a pasuk. V'ata hinei heveti et reshit pri adama asher nasatali. This is the mitzvah of bringing the first fruits to Yerushalayim, to the Beit HaMikdash. The farmers, remember that Klal Yisrael was principally an agricultural society, and main mitzvah in the Torah is bringing one's first fruits to the Beit HaMikdash, giving them to the Kohen after he dedicates them, and making the statement which makes up the major, the central motif of the Haggadah. All those psukim, Arami Oved Avi, God took me, we suffered, then he took me out of Egypt, and he brought me into the land of Eretz Yisrael. Those are the verses of the statement of Bikurim, of bringing the Bikurim, thanking the Ribono Shel Olam for everything he gave us. And I want to just point out to you that according to the Rambam, people make a mistake. They say that they think the mitzvah is bringing the first fruits. That's not the mitzvah. The mitzvah is thanking the Ribono Shel Olam for what he does for us, and the avenue of doing that is bringing the first fruits. This is the exact language of the Rambam in the Sefer HaMitzvot, says it very clearly. It's a mitzvah to thank the Ribono Shel Olam, right? And by bringing the fruits, the first fruits, this is bring our first, right? This is a way we really say thank you in the best manner, okay? Now, based on this pasuk, he's going to say over a Maisa. Based on a Gemara. There's a Gemara in Shabbos, Horasov Shel Rebbe Elazar ben Azariah, a story about the cow that belonged to Rebbe Elazar ben Azariah. Shemati b'shem Rebbe Shmelka Mizvil Zatzal. I heard from the great Rebbe, Rav Shmelka Mizvil. Now, if you haven't heard of Rav Shmelka Mizvil, it might be you have heard of him. There's a very old cemetery near the Knesset, near the Israel Museum, in that section, a small old cemetery in Yerushalayim where the Zvila Rebbe is buried. And there's a great schus for shidduchim of going to the kever of the Rebbe Mizvil in that cemetery. And literally thousands of people go, and there are amazing, miraculous stories about shidduchim that have been made by virtue of going and davening that the schus of the Rebbe should help in the shidduch. In any case, that's not what he's talking about, but he heard from the Rebbe Mizvil, Al Maimer Chazal, concerning the story of the Porato shel Rebbe Elazar ben Azariah, Haita Yotzat Beritzua Sheben Karneha Shelo Beratzon Chachamim. It's a Gemara in Shabbos. The Mishnah in Shabbos talks about certain things that even an animal cannot carry if there's no eruv. It's considered a burden. Now, putting a strap between the horns of a bull, let's say, cow, is considered, a masui. It's considered a burden. And there's a mitzvah of shvitat behema. The mitzvah of Shabbos doesn't just apply to us, it applies to our animals also. Our animals have to rest on Shabbat also. So if my animal goes out with a strap between its horns, then I'm responsible that my animal carried on Shabbat, right? And this was against the parah, the cow of Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah went out with this strap, right? That's what the Gemara says. Now, the Gemara, Paraso shel Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, the Gemara asks, Chada Parah Habale? Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah was a gazillionaire. He had one cow? What do you mean the cow of Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah? Amar Rav, Amri Law, Amar Rav Yehuda, Amar Rav, the rabbis report, Tresar, Alfe, Egle, Have, Meiser, Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, Me'edre, Kol Shata V'Shata. Every year, the Meiser means the 1/10 of his cattle, right? Every year, 1/10 of his cattle was thousands of was Tresar Agle Agagolim was 12,000 calves, right? That was the Meiser. Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah Mi'ad Rishon. Tana lo shalohite. So what does he say? Lo shalohite. So what does it mean? The cow of Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah. What does it mean? He had millions of cows. Ella lo shalohite. This cow did not belong to him. Ella shel shchenato. It belonged to a neighbor of his. Umitoch shelo michaba. But he did not stop the person. He did not go over and talk to the person and say, you can't do this. Kol shata, that right? So the cow is considered his cow. He was the rabbi. He was the Rav. He was Elazar ben Azariah. His neighbor, his next door neighbor did this, and he didn't say anything. This is his cow. Not the millions of cows that he had, the other million. Kilomar, the Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, hayu alfe behemot. He had tens of thousands of cows. Shahari bechol shana noldu be'edro meya ve'esrim elef. Every year they were born in his Eder, Meya ve'esrim elef behemot, 120,000 cows were born a year in his cattle, right? Upora achat yotza k'ritzua bein karnotav. One cow goes out with a strap between its horns. V'hilo haita shelo didn't really belong to him. Ela shel shcheno. Shchento, it belonged to his neighbor. V'afal pike, that notwithstanding, in the Mishnah, Nifta Parato shel Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah. The Mishnah refers to it as the cow of Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah. How do we get our heads around this? Umisha lo made it ha-Mishnah levad. Whoever learns this Mishnah below ha-Gemara, without the Gemara, Savur holds shazu haita be'emet parato shel Rabbi Elazar. This was his para, right? So lama higila onish kazeh. Why should he get such a punishment? But of course, we saw the Gemara now. Ubifrat the Yerushalmi, especially in the Jerusalem Talmud, Amar Rebbe Chananya, Pam achat yatzat v'hishchiro shinav minatzoma. So one time, Pam achat yatzat. One time this cow went out like that. V'hishchiro shinav minatzoma. And Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, for the rest of his life, his teeth were black from fasting. Rabbi Elazar al oto pam, and that one time, shalom micha, because he didn't tell the person to do tshuva, so he was now doing tshuva. All his life he did tshuva. Asa tshuva norait. V'hushcharu shinav mipnei tzomot. He fasted so many days. He would fast all his life that his teeth were not white anymore, right? Lama im kein nichtav b'torah shehi netzach netzachim parato shel Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah. Haytayot said, why does it the Torah insist, the Mishnah insists on calling it his para, when in fact it was his neighbors? He did tshuva all his life for doing this, even though he had hundreds of thousands of his own, right? So he says it like this, it's a dvar musar. Ulam bir ha-Rebbe, so the Rebbe said, Keshanit bonein, if you think about Mikol Alfei Agoli Machalo, all the millions of cattle that Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah had, Lo notar lo klum. After 120 years, nothing was left. Kol asirot ha'atzuma zu eino klum shalo. It doesn't belong to him. Aval otah para, when he leaves this world, otah para she'aleh asa tshuva, that one para upon which he did tshuva, me'ava, tshuva out of love, he hafcha l'zchut, this was his merit. He went to Olam Haba not with 1,000,000 cows. He went to Olam Haba with one cow, the cow upon which he did tshuva. Shahari b'tshuva me'ava zdonot nasot lo k'zchuyot. This is a fitting Gemara for as we approach in the month of Elul, we approach the Yemei Adin, right? That when one does tshuva from love, his zadon, even the purposeful averas that he does on purpose, become merits, right? Not accidental averas, but they become merits. L'chein nikret hi porato shel Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah. That's why it's called the cow of Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah. He hapora shebem. This is the one cow, be'emet shelo, which really belonged to him. V'nishar imo lenetzach netzachim, and belonged to him forever and ever. Okay, let's go to the final piece. From a Dvar Musar to a beautiful machshava from Rav Hutner on Rosh Hashanah, on a very well-known Gemara that we're all familiar with it, and he's going to start with it, and he's going to bring out something very special. Shlosha Sfarim Nichtav. This is not the whole piece. I've cut it down, so we'll be okay. Here's the thing. We know this. Shlosha Sfarim Niftachim. There are 3 Sfarim that are opened up on Rosh Hashanah, right? Tzadikim Gemurim Nechtamim La'alter L'chaim. Tzadikim, purely righteous people, are sealed on Yom Kippur to a long life. Rishayim Gemurim, thoroughly evil people, La'alter L'misa, to death. Beinonim, the people in the middle, Tuluyim V'omdim, they stand in the balance, they hang in the balance. Ad Yom Kippurim, from Rosh Hashanah to Yom Kippur, right? Zachu, if they merit, Nechtamim L'chayim, they are sealed for life. Lo Zachu, if they do not merit, Nechtamim Lemita, they are sealed for death. Harambam, that's the Gemara. The Rambam, curiously, Kishahatik Braisazu, when he brings this Gemara for a halacha, Shina Loshen HaGemara, he changes ever so slightly, he changes the language of the Gemara. The Besugyan Haloshen Hu Zachu, the Beinoni, the man in the middle, if he merits, right, Nichtamim L'chayim, he's sealed for life. Harambam Shina Haloshen, the Rambam changes it. He says that the Beinoni is Mechza, right? He's half and half, right? Right? Not Zachu. Im also Tshuva, if he does Tshuva, Nechtamim L'chayim, he's sealed for life. B'makom Zchut, Bichlal, instead of saying he merits, right? He makes it more specific, L'tshuva Dafka. If this man in the middle, this Benoni does Tshuva, he gets sealed for life. Not if he merits it, right? Now, he brings a question from Maran Hagon, Rabbi Yitzchak Blazer mi Peterburg. This is what Rabbi Yitzchak Blazer was known as Rabbi Itzla Peterburger because he was the chief rabbi of St. Petersburg. I'd mentioned in the past, he was one of the three major students of Rabbi Yisrael Salanter. And it's interesting, when he became the rabbi of St. Petersburg, no, today it's not called, it's called Leningrad, right? Leningrad is St. Petersburg, I believe. So, but it used to be called St. Petersburg. So he was known as Rabbi Itzla Peterburger. So they came to make him the rabbi in St. Petersburg. He wasn't living there. And his wife had a little store, a grocery store. He sat in the back learning Torah, writing Chidushim. And they came to see him, and they came to ask him to be the Rav of St. Petersburg. You know what his answer was? I might have told some of you this years ago. His answer was, I can't be the rabbi. Why not? I'm afraid to paskin shilas. So they said to him, what? You're hired. We don't want someone who very glibly, oh, that's mutter. Oh, that's usser. We want someone who takes psak halacha very seriously. And he became Rav Itzla Peterburger, okay? But he asks a question on this Rambam. He doesn't understand why the Rambam has to change the language. What do you mean? What do you mean? The man in the middle, right? He's 50-50, right? He has 50% of errors and 50% mitzvahs, right? So he says, yes, like this. To me, a rabbi, here's my question. The Hari Habenani, who's there, Shemaisav Shkulim, his deeds are half, they're equal. There's no good is not over evil, right? It's a 50-50. V'im came, therefore, kol schut shetielo, the merit that he has, tiyeh masha tiyeh, whatever it is, biyada lahotzi michlal kalgu palga. Take a schus, take one mitzvah, and put it on top from 50 to 50, make it 51 to, ulahachnisok leklal, rubo zechuyot. Let it be rubo zechuyot. Let him have a majority of merits, of schus, to be zochet, right? Add one more mitzvah, and you've gone over the top, right? What's this business with tshuva? It's a mathematical thing. It's a quantitative thing. He's half and half. So change the math. Take one more, do one more mitzvah, right? So you are now you're 51 to 49. You win. What's this business of tshuva? Okay? That's his question. So Rav Huna is going to answer the question by saying that this whole idea of his whole approach is really not accurate of what the man in the middle really means, right? It's not simply somebody who's 50% one way and 50% the other way. Amnam, to me, this question that he asks is an excuse for us for mikor motze yafeh lebirur hamabat shel rubo zechuyot v'ribui averot, to properly explain what it means that he has an overabundance of sins versus an overabundance of mitzvot, or vice versa. Shigra machshava tofeset. Superficially, we conclude at hamusag ribui zechuyot that hamusag ribui zechuyot avonot kemusag kemoti. We think of it as a quantitative thing, right? Superficially, it's quantitative, right? Glomar, aval pi shebevadai ein hamispar hagorem abiladi l'shikul zeh shel rubo zechuyot oleva. Since there are other things that play here, right? It's not just the mathematics. It's not just the quantity. As we spoke about last week, there's a certain quality to certain kinds of mitzvot, right? One mitzvah might be worth 10 merit points, right? So, but it's not all mathematics. Mikol makom, but ein ledalek kan al habechina hakamotit. But you can't discount. Excuse me, the expression, the pun. You cannot discount the mathematics of the quantification of mitzvahs and averas, right? The bevada yeshna tova achat. There's certain mitzvahs that are worth more than one mitzvah can be worth 10 averas, and the other way around. Okay, afilu mishkala shel ota tova or shel ota ra mitchalef misha achat lechaverta. So let's say it switches around, right? Rambam says mishkal zehu mishkalo shel kel deot. We mentioned this last week, that who makes the cheshbon in the end? Who's the bigger tzaddik? right? The Rebbeinu Shalom makes the cheshbon, because you could be a Jew living in Yerushalayim doing every single mitzvah, and a Jew living in Wichita, Kansas, who only keeps kosher, but he goes with Moshe Nefesh to get that meat to him, right? So he's going to be better. So it's not just mathematics, right? Aber b'chol zot, noi de mishkal zechuyot v'chovot hu mishkal echuti. So it is also not only kamoti, it's not only quantitative, it's also qualitative, right? Mikol makom, still hachefta shel hamishkal hazeh, dehainu hadvarim b'mishkal zeh shokel hem sikum shel komiyut mitzvot ve'vrot. But at the end of the day, there's a calculation of how many mitzvahs and how many averas he has. Okay, so some mitzvahs might be worth much more, so he goes up. His mathematics go up, right? But it's basically, isn't it basically a mathematical thing, right? That is the superficial way of understanding it. Now, what's wrong with that? Now, here I'm going to fill in the blanks. This is not on the sheet. The last paragraph is just going to be the conclusion. But what's wrong if it's quantitatively? Just add another schut, right? Or add another schut that's worth 10 schutim, right? But it's still mathematical, right? What's wrong with that, right? A person is changing constantly. Right? I do a mitzvah today, I did another Avera. Avera, mitzvah. It's a graph, it's constantly changing. So when do you stop the clock? Does it really mean that by Nila Yom Kippur, the Rebbeinu Shalom stops the clock? Okay, where are you? Right? Like some kind of a game show on television, right? He stops the clock and he counts up how many mitzvahs you have and how many Averas you have. Are you equal? Are you more? Are you less? Does that make sense? Obviously not. It can't make sense, right? So it's much more. It's something else. It's about the person. It's about who he is. It's not about what he does, right? Like, for example, even if let's say someone is a tzaddik. He's a tzaddik, right? He's tzaddik. And he does an Avera, right? And a Rasha does the same Avera. The Avera is much worse when the Rasha does it, because the tzaddik is still a tzaddik. He did an Avera. He's going to do tshuva, right? There's a certain quality to the Avera that he does, even if it's the same Avera that the Rasha does, right? Right? Let's see the final thing. It'll come out beautifully now. Does Rubo Zechuyot or Rubo Averot, whether a person has a majority of sins or a majority of merit points or a majority of demerit points, whether he's in the middle, right? Whether he's a tzaddik, a Rasha in the middle, Einam sikum shel pratim. It's not mathematical. Elamida shebenefesh. It's about who he is. It's about who he is. It's about how he sees himself. Mabat chirish ze biyado lishlol ta'anato shel moran Rabbi. So now I'm going to answer Rabbi Tzla's question. It's not a question. It's not about adding one mitzvah, right? Rabbi Tzla said no. Ki mikevan shehabenani hu mefzal mitzvah, since he's 50-50. Im kain halo maspik lo lasot lahosif zechut achat, add one merit point al zechuyotav on his zechuyot l'zechut hachatima at the time of the signing. Tov Yom Kippur, he said he's good. He's no longer a merit guy. He's no longer a middle guy anymore. He becomes a tzaddik. He says, "V'lama who's kaka Rambam as a benoni lasot tshuva." No. So why does the Rambam say no? He has to do tshuva. Here's what he says. Achshav anurom. Now we see it. Shlilato shel tainazu. This question is not a good. It's not a question, right? Shahare lefi mashenit baer lanu. The way we were explaining it, rubo zechuyot he midasha benefesh. If a person has more merits than demerits, that's a statement of who he is, who he wants to be. Even if at that moment he has more demerits than merits, but he is a person who wants to be a person with more merits, and he'll do tshuva, right? It's a midasha benefesh. Hari lefi mashenit baer lanu, right? Again, it's a midasha v'ruba averot hu midasha benefesh. That's what I want to be. I want to be a Russia. I just want to do all the bad things, right? Kamoke, therefore, bevadai. Im ha-benoniyut, the man in the middle, is a midah benefesh, the man in the middle. Not that he's 50-50. Kolomar adam hazeh mityachesu el harav el hatov mibli shetiyelo benefesh. He's the azut. He doesn't have a tudat zehut. He has no identity. He doesn't have his dehut. He doesn't know who he is. That's the Beinoni. I don't know if I want to go this way or I want to go that way, right? The tzaddik is a person who knows which way he wants to go, even if at that moment is more averis than mitzvahs. He's still a tzaddik because he's going. That's why the Rosh says if he does tshuva, and that's what this man in the middle has to do. He has to discover himself, right? But this man, tiyelo benafsho ein beli, he hasn't have benafsho. He's naut. He has no identity. Imechad mehem with either way. Midato shel abenoni hu mida shel choser. He's naut. The definition of the man in the middle is a guy with no identity. He doesn't know where he was going to go. Hamida hazu tamod beina ubetokfa afilu im yitosfu lo kama zechuyot. So even if he adds a couple of mitzvahs, but he's still a man in the middle, hasn't decided. Okay, I'll do this. Okay, maybe I'll do this. I won't. Vafilu im yosef zechuyot achi yisarbu ki kama. Even if he goes over the top, adayin midatohu midata benoniut. He's still a man in the middle. V'kol zman shemidato nivchenet hu mivchan habenoniut. And as long as his identity has not been discerned, he hasn't, ein kan makom lahatema chatima latova. There can't be a chatima latova. Person has to make a decision. I'm going to be about tshuva. I'm going to make a tshuva. I'm going to do tshuva. I'm human. I'm going to do the best I can. Right? Asher kain. That's why the Rambam changes the language. It's not about merits, right? He repaired his personality. He's no longer the man in the middle. He's determined. He's going in one direction. It's only tshuva that's going to get him out of this rut, this incorrect view of himself, and become a tzaddik, right? And he will merit life, eternal life. So this is a beautiful understanding of why the Rambam changed one little word in this very famous Gemara that we're all familiar with, okay? So we've got our work cut out for ourselves, okay? Next week, we're going to do the Parsha, or maybe not. Next week, I want to focus on Yom Kippur. This is an unusual year. It's Yom Kippur Shechal Liot b'Shabbat. Yom Kippur comes out on Shabbos, and I want to talk about that. Is that just a calendric happening, or is there something very special about something additional about Shabbos that comes out on the Shabbos of Shabbosim on Yom Kippur? That's what we're going to discuss next week. Okay, thank you very much. Have a wonderful evening. Have a wonderful week. Okay, and hopefully we'll see some of you on Wednesday. We're going to talk on Wednesday about machlokas between the Talmud and the Shulchan Aruch, the Poskim, and the Zohar, between Kabbalah, there was mysticism, and revealed Torah. How do we paskin? That's what we're going to talk about on Wednesday. Okay, thank you all. Take care.